This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. A couple months ago, June, right toward the end of the month in June, I talked about this particular case where the Alabama legislature was absolutely thumbing its nose, to use a Shakespeare, with biting your thumb, not Shakespearean. It's thumbing its nose at the Supreme Court and the federal courts, who ordered them to redraw their congressional district maps to include two black congressional. I tell you what, here's what I'll do. I'm going to play a very brief clip, let's say a minute and a half or so from that video to get you a flavor, save my voice, and then we'll come back and talk about what is happening right now and what the courts are now saying about their defiance, and it's good for democracy. Here we go as a refresher from 2 months ago. Imagine a world where when the Supreme Court ruled in a radical way, like the overturning of Roe v. Wade, like the many instances of this 6-3 Supreme Court usurping constitutional rights for millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of Americans. Imagine if Democrats were to just ignore that ruling. Imagine the outcry, the rage, the trembling, the gnashing of teeth and wailing that would come from Republicans. And maybe rightly so. But because the Republican Party is a party of hypocrisy and a party of disregard for decency, they're doing that very thing, defying the United States Supreme Court when it ruled that Alabama had to redraw congressional districts to make them not unfair. Get a load of this headline from NBC News. Alabama GOP refuses to draw second black district despite Supreme Court order. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, and Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican of Alabama, have been calling state legislatures about the map, which could affect control of Congress. This has huge implications when Congress, both the Senate and the House, although this won't affect the Senate, are so tight. The majority in the House of Representatives that Republicans hold right now is wildly tiny. That's largely why they've ignored the impropriety and crimes and embarrassment that is George Santos. Alabama Republicans rejected calls to draw a second majority black congressional district this week, instead creating maps that Democrats and advocates say completely ignore a recent ruling from the United States Supreme Court. A federal court ordered the state to redraw its congressional map last year to include two districts where black voters make up voting age majorities, or something quite close to it. The Supreme Court affirmed the ruling this year, prompting the legislature to call a special session to redraw the map this week. So that is where we were, and this is where we are. I'm going to read to you just a brief bit from this ruling from the court, and I want you to keep in, first of all, this is a 217-page answer from a 3-judge panel in the United States District Court of Northern District of Alabama, the Southern Division. This is a big deal. This is a case where the Supreme Court said, go back. The lower court ruling stands. You need to do this. And now they've rejected the order to do so. They're rejecting the order of a federal court. And now a special master, someone appointed by the court, is going to put this thing in motion because they refuse. This is from page 8, if you're following along at home. We have reached these conclusions, the conclusions I just mentioned, only after conducting an exhaustive analysis of an extensive record under well-developed legal standards, as Supreme Court precedent instructs. We do not take lightly federal intrusion into a process ordinarily reserved for the state legislature. But we have now said twice that this Voting Rights Act case is not close, and we are deeply troubled This is a federal court, 3-judge panel saying, and we are deeply troubled that the state enacted a map that the state readily admits does not provide the remedy we said federal law requires. We are disturbed by the evidence that the state delayed remedial proceedings, but ultimately did not even nurture the ambition to provide the required remedy. And we are struck by the extraordinary circumstance we face. We are not aware of any other case in which a state legislature, faced with a federal court order declaring that its electoral plan unlawfully dilutes minority votes and requiring a plan that provides an additional opportunity district, responded with a plan that the state concedes does not provide that district. The law requires the creation of an additional district that affords Black Alabamians, like everyone else, a fair and reasonable opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. The 2023 plan plainly fails to do so. That is a blistering indictment from a 3-judge panel in this federal court. The Alabama legislature is defying this court and, by extension, the order of the United States Supreme Court. Look, I'll ask the question again, as I did in that refresher. What if Democrats were to do this? What if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris or any other Democratic institution or elected representative, where they're just, we're not going to do it. We're not going to follow what the Supreme Court says. What would Republicans be doing? Yeah, I mean, even if it's a justified ignoring with this fascist 6-3 Supreme Court, even if it was that, Republicans would be losing their minds. One more page. This is page 193. Because we enjoin the use of the 2023 plan, a new congressional districting plan must be devised and implemented in advance of Alabama's upcoming congressional elections. The state has conceded that it would be practically impossible for the legislature to reconvene in time to enact a new plan for use in the upcoming election. Accordingly, we find that there is no need to provide the legislature with a second bite at the apple or other good cause to further delay remedial proceedings. We will therefore undertake our duty to cure violative districts through an orderly process in advance of elections by directing the special master and his team to draw remedial maps. And then they go through and say who they're going to name. So the Alabama legislature is so defiant and so incompetent that, one, they refuse the order of a federal court while touting the rule of law. How would the Alabama legislature think of it if people just ignored the laws that they wrote? Obviously, rhetorical. I think we all know how they would act. But now, because they cannot do their jobs, they are incompetent at their core, someone else is going to have to do it for them. An unelected individual appointed by the court is going to do what the court has ordered, what law requires of them. Ugh. These Republicans are disgusting, reprehensible hypocrites. Because if they were treated in the manner they are treating the federal courts and federal law, they would be losing their minds. Anyway, good news that someone is on the case getting things done for better representation in Alabama. What are your thoughts on this? I'd love to know. You can call, leave me a brief voicemail. 714-576-4054 is where, again, a brief voicemail can be left. You can also email me, daily@dollemore.com. If I am your flavor of political commentator and you want to help support my work, click the join button below. For $2 a month, you can become a channel member. You can also hit the super thanks button or go over to my Patreon page, patreon.com/IDoubtIt podcast. Both of those are great ways to help support what we do right here. Follow me on social media. I'm at Dollemore everywhere. I'd love to see you there. And I will see you next time. Until I do, be genuine. Take care of one another.